Hello to everybody. Greetings from Dhaka, Bangladesh. It's a great pleasure for me to initiate this series of events, online events that we will be hosting over the next 10 days. For those of you who are not familiar, we did this last year in association with the Resilience Hub at COP26 in Glasgow. There were a series of regional online sessions that fed into the COP last year. But the way we did it last year, we did it in tandem with the COP at the same time. And although the events went well, the connection with the people in COP was not ideal because everybody was, it was just too hectic to make those connections. And so this year we're doing it again. The Resilience Hub is going to be operating in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt as a physical hub, but we're also doing the regional sessions. And this time we're doing them before the COP so that they can be completed at, properly. And the messages can then be developed and honed and prepared for delivery to the people who will be at the Resilience Hub in the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh in a more edited and appropriate manner. Last year, it was a bit too hectic and ad hoc. So this year, the Africa Regional Hub, I believe, just finished over the last few days, and the South Asia Regional Hub is now about to start. My colleague, Celine de Cruz, who is with us here today, is coordinating all of them. We have, I think, 9 sessions coming over the next 10 days. And today's session is something that my colleague, Sarah, will be conducting. The purpose of these events is threefold. Firstly, for people working on a particular theme or a particular community in the South Asia region to come together, share what they're doing, network with each other, do some planning together if you want. And secondly, to try to agree on a short message for the COP27 from your group. What do you expect from the COP? What would you like the COP to know about? And what would you like as an outcome from the COP? And thirdly, to do a little bit more forward thinking and planning and think to March of 2023, next year, when we will be holding the 3rd Global Gobeshona Conference on locally led adaptation and resilience. And if you are interested and can come up with things that you feel you can do between now and then we would encourage you to think about hosting a session in the Gobeshona Conference. The dates have not been fixed, but it will be middle of March 2023. And you can then take this, what you start today, forward in terms of taking the ideas and the networking opportunities forward. So we see this as not just a one-off event, but also planning for further work and collaboration for those of you who are interested, and coming up with ideas on how to do that going forward. So I'm very glad that we are starting this. I'm looking forward to participating as much as I can in all the events. And let me hand over to Celine. Celine?
Great. Thank you, Professor Haq. If I could request Mehdi to just put up the slides. So this year, for 2022, ICAD, who's the host of the South Asia Resilience Hub, has decided to focus on local adapters and local champions. And we see the Resilience Hub as an opportunity to bring in groups who have never participated before in a climate conversation, and groups who have never even hosted webinars of this nature before. So So this is all new, and it is a messy process. There's a lot of work gone in the preparation of each of these discussions with each of these groups, and they are going to bring very clear messages to COP27 from their constituency. We see three opportunities in participating in this process. First of all, it is a capacity building opportunity for groups who've never participated in a climate discussion to build their leadership, to participate, engage, and discuss in these conversations. It is also an opportunity for learned people like all of you who normally participate in these climate conversations to begin to engage with local knowledge and local experiences and see how you can be allies to this process. The third opportunity we see is that by this venture of the external engaging with the local, we're able to strengthen the local adaptive strategies of specific constituencies. And as I walk through the program, you will get an idea of these specific constituencies. Today, we have indigenous people from Tangail and Modhupur in Bangladesh who will be talking about their practices, locally adaptive practices, and what is important for them in their conversation on climate and what they would like to bring to the table. Tomorrow is going to be a free day. The group who was planning to work to host a session tomorrow has opted out. So our next session is going to be on the 22nd. And that will include coastal communities from the Cox's Bazar, and we will hear from them. On the 23rd, the women farmers from Maharashtra and India will talk about their solutions and how they engage with government. On the 24th, we have the Chittagong Hill communities and the indigenous communities from Chittagong who will explain what they are attempting to do on the climate front. On the 25th, the city of Janeda, a group of young architects will be talking about their work with teachers, young people, and informal communities of how they're co-creating a strategy with local government to make the city more resilient. On the 26th, we have our friends from the Urban Resource Center in Karachi who will be talking about the floods in Pakistan and what actually causes the floods in Pakistan. On the 27th, the mangrove communities of Sundarbans, both from the Bangladesh side and the Indian side, will present both their work on the ground, and my colleague Afsara will present about the research and the way ICAD plays a role in actually brokering this knowledge at the local level to make it more accessible and available to these local groups. On the 28th, we have UNM from Nepal. It's a group working in the far western mountain region of Nepal. It's called the Bajang district. And we will hear from them about their issues and their solutions. On the 29th, the youth group will talk about their role as a youth group in the food supply chain and how they go about obtaining ideas from young people on food and agriculture. On the 30th, climate migrants from Mongla city, who are also part of the informal city, will be talking about the three main issues that matter to them, which is evictions, how to find security of tenure in a new city, in an alien city, and how to deal with issues of basic services and water in their city. So this is kind of a roundup. We urge each of you to actually attend these sessions. That's why we have only kept one session a day, and we hope you have the time to attend them. The reason that we have concentrated on geography is because we feel geography is also part of the politics of how local communities organize and engage with their local governments and their national governments. And we want to open up that space for communities to build their capacity to do that. So this is just a small experiment, and we hope that we are able to build on this for the next 10 to 15 years, and we continue to strengthen the hands and the voices and the capacity of these communities to influence. Thank you. I'm handing it over to Apsara.
Thank you so much, Celine, for that very informative introduction, and for all the details of the sessions. In the chat box, we have shared a full program list of how it's gonna look in the next 10 days. In the meantime, I will just ask for 5 minutes so that all our speakers and panelists can join for today's session, if that's okay. And then we can start, Celine, is that okay?
Oh yes, please go ahead.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, now we can hear.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, I guess we can start since everyone has joined. So a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Sarah Mirza. I'm currently working as a research officer at International Center for Climate Change and Development. And today I'll be moderating the first half of the session at the Resilience Hub of COP27. And today our session is titled as the impacts of climate change on indigenous people's livelihoods in Bangladesh. And we are focusing on a case study from Modhupur Tangail region, which is located in the central part of Bangladesh. Just a little bit of background of how we ended up doing this pilot study with Cambridge Global Challenge, and our technical partner here was Kapang Foundation. Since we all know that climate change is a global concern in today's time, and its impact on the vulnerable populations such as women, children, indigenous people is exacerbating their existing social and economic challenges. For example, the indigenous communities are more susceptible to the impacts of climate change because they're living beside nature and their livelihood depends on the natural resources for survival. However, they're the most active people and innovative in creating adaptation solutions. And against this background, with the funding from Cambridge Global Challenge and with the help of Kapang Foundation, we had conducted a pilot study that really aimed to gather indigenous peoples and local communities' perception to the exposure to climate change and natural disasters. At the same time, it wanted to improve scientific evidence based on their climate change adaptation strategies. So before going to the brilliant lineup of the panelists, today we have one community representative whose name is Liang Ritchil. He is also joining us. Today we also have Shalaija Fennell, Dr. Shalaija Fennell from Cambridge University. And we also have Philip Gain, who also leads a research institution. And before I welcome them to the panel session, I would like to share a brief presentation on our study. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background on what the project was about and why this is so important to share in today's COP27 Resilience Hub. So, the study mainly identified the challenges and potential integration with scientific tools. Other than that, the study also aimed to incorporate the knowledge of people from the South. And that was the main reason we also collaborated with Cambridge Global Challenge, right? Because a lot of studies are not focused in the global South and also not with indigenous people. So we thought that this partnership will lead to more long-term opportunities in collaborating in other projects or like research study with indigenous people. Next slide, please. So, when we were in the initial stage of design, when we had the early stage of conversation with Cambridge Global Challenge, we really, in the map, you can see that we have identified where the indigenous people in Bangladesh are residing and what kind of climate change impacts that they're facing. So, for example, as we all know that climate change is intensifying, for example, like erratic rainfall or like landslides, flash floods. So first of all, we identified the areas where the indigenous people are residing. And then, we focused more on the indigenous communities who are not really well recognized, for example, in the scientific journal papers or in the research arena. So we identified this community of Garo communities who are residing in the central part of Bangladesh. And when we were at the initial stage of our literature review, we didn't find a lot of literature that focused on them. So that's why that was the whole point of really including them in the research. And as I mentioned, that today we have the community leader Liang, who was our local translator and also our guide who helped us to carry out the key informant interviews and the focus group discussion. And in this slide, you can see that while doing our focus group discussion and key informant interviews, we had 43 respondents, where we had you can say equal participation, almost equal participation of female and male. Next slide, please. And as this project really wanted to have an overview of how the impacts of climate change is really exacerbating the already existing social, economic, and social economic and political challenges that are already existing, but climate change is exacerbating all of them. So for example, in our study, we saw that, it is having a huge impact on the water, sanitation, hygiene facilities of the communities. At the same time, it is also reducing the agriculture productivity when it comes to animal and livestock productivity, but also crop yield, because there is erratic rainfall. And it's also having an impact on the fisheries yield. And since it's having an impact on the food chain, since that's why we also learned that it's also having a huge impact on the health and well-being of those communities, and also it's stressing the infrastructures that are already in place. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, that the social challenges, the economic challenges, they already exist, right? So climate change, due to climate change, these social challenges are being more enhanced, which is having an impact on their livelihoods in general, right? Because the challenges already exist, and climate change is enhancing the rate of all those challenges that is impacting their livelihoods. Next slide, please. And one of the impact that I would say human behavioral is causing, or human behavior is causing, is when we were conducting our interviews, is that it's having a impact on the alien species, and at the end of the day, that is impacting the biodiversity and ecosystem. So in the Modhupur region of Bangladesh, that is where we have a good range of forest coverage. Hence, we have a good biodiversity, right? So we can see that 100 years of trees that are existing there. But recently, when we were conducting our study, we saw that government is introducing acacia tree, and they're replacing the shal trees. And that is having an impact on the ecosystem and biodiversity, since it's being poisonous for some birds and insects. Next slide, please. So in the midst of all this chaos, right? So indigenous people are being still resilient. They're still adapting to the impacts of climate change by utilizing their indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge. And this indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge is composed of these three aspects, which is their adaptive capacity, their personal beliefs, and also the practices that they have carried out for a generation now, and which is also helping them to develop early warning systems. At the same time, that is helping them to adapt to the daily impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. And here we have, few of the codes that we took from the from the indigenous communities when we were conducting our interviews. And this is how they really predicted if there will be more rainfall or less rainfall by just observing the insects' movements, right? So in this slide, we tried to show that they have their early warning system, which has been in place for millennia now. Next slide, please. And here is a little photo gallery of, when we went to the field during March. And here you can see that when we were conducting the FGDs, like the focus group discussion with the local communities, at the same time, we have some local communities' livelihoods displayed here and where we visited. You can see that most of the local communities, they depend a lot on their agriculture activities, and also the women are seen that they're involved in sewing, knitting during their leisure time when they're not working in the field. That's all from me. Thank you so much. Now my colleague Fatima Akhtar will carry out the rest of the conversation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fatima Akhtar, and I work as a research officer at ICAD, and I will be the moderator for today's session. And thank you, Afsara, for your insightful presentation. And as we all know, there are many social, political, and economical challenges existing in the lands where the indigenous communities reside. However, in today's session, we would like to emphasize the climatic changes that are exacerbating all these challenges, especially in terms of the indigenous agriculture and livelihood perspective. Therefore, without further delay, I would like to invite our distinguished panelists for today's session and get to know more from them. So today's first speaker will be Liang Ritchil. He's an advocate and indigenous community representative. He's also the General Secretary of the Garo Student Federation based in Modhupur. He will share the life experiences of his communities. Then we have Dr. Shailaja Fennell, who is the Regional Transformation and Economic Security Professor at the Department of Land Economy of University of Cambridge. She's also the director of the Center of South Asian Studies at Cambridge University. Her research interests include institutional reform and regional transformation. Dr. Fennell will share her perspective on the importance of cultural heritage with sustainable agriculture and indigenous people's livelihoods. And our third speaker is Mr. Philip Gain, who is a researcher and director of the Society for Environment and Human Development, which is SHED. He is also a journalist by training. He is a researcher, photographer, and adjunct faculty of Department of Media and Communication at Independent University of Bangladesh. Sir will discuss the solution, policy recommendation, and way forward. So I would request all of you to share your feedback or thoughts on this. You will be allocated 5 to 6 minutes. In the meantime, dear audience, if you have any queries or any question to our speakers, please put them in the chat box. The floor is on yours, Liangda. You can deliver your speech in Bangla. We have a translator who will help us with this. Thank you. Thank you.
ধন্যবাদ জানাতে চাই। আমাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছেন ম্যাম?
জি।
হ্যাঁ, আমি আমাকে সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য ধন্যবাদ জানাই। বিশেষভাবে গারো স্টুডেন্ট ফেডারেশন জিএসএফ এর পক্ষ থেকে যারাই আজকে এই আলোচনায় সংযুক্ত হয়েছেন, আপনাদের সকলকে আন্তরিক প্রীতি ও শুভেচ্ছা জানাচ্ছি। আইকেড রিসেন্টলি আইকেড এসেছিল মধুপুরে গবেষণার জন্য। আমি সাথে ছিলাম আইকেডের সাথে গবেষণাতে। তো আমি মধুপুরের বিষয়ে কিছু বলতে চাই। সেটা হচ্ছে আমাদের আজকের এই আলোচনায় এখানে আছেন, আমরা লক্ষ্য করতে পাচ্ছি এখানে মধুপুর সম্পর্কে 80-র দশকে, সেই 80-র দশকে গিয়েছিলেন তরুণ বয়সে স্যার ফিলিপ গাইন। উনি মধুপুরকে নিয়ে গভীরভাবে উনি গবেষণা করেছেন। আমাদের থেকেও মানে আমার জন্মের আগেও উনি সেখানে গিয়েছিলেন, আমার থেকেও অনেক বেশি জানে ফিলিপ দা। ওনাকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ জানাই। আজকে এই সুযোগটা পাচ্ছি, তার জন্য আপনারা যা আয়োজন করেছেন আপনাদের সকলকে ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। আর আরেকটি বিষয় হচ্ছে মধুপুরের বর্তমান পরিস্থিতি। শুধু মধুপুরই বলবো কেন, মধুপুর ছাড়াও যারা বনবাসী আদিবাসী আছে, যারা গিরিঝিরি ঝর্ণাধারাতে বসবাস করে, তারা কেউ ভালো নেই। কোথাও না কোথাও তারা অনেক সমস্যার সম্মুখীন হচ্ছে। পৃথিবী প্রকৃতি দিনকে দিন যে বন আছে, যতটুকু বন আছে সেটা বিলীন হয়ে যাচ্ছে। যে বিষয়টি আমি বলতে চাই সেটা হচ্ছে, যে আবেদনের কথাটি আমি বলতে চাই সেটা হচ্ছে শালবন। আমি শৈশব থেকে আমার বেড়ে ওঠা মধুপুরের এই শাল অরণ্যের এই ছায়াতলে আমার বেড়ে ওঠা। আমি দেখেছি ছোট সময়, আমি নিজেও কিন্তু গরু চড়িয়েছি আমার পরিবার থেকে। আমি দেখেছি কতটা বন ছিল, কতটা গহীন ছিল। এমনকি আমাদের বাপদাদার মুখেও শুনেছি যে শাল বন অনেক গহীন ছিল। এক গ্রাম থেকে মধুপুর অনেক গ্রাম, কিন্তু একটা গ্রাম থেকে আরেকটা গ্রাম কিন্তু ওয়াকিং ডিস্টেন্স নয়, অনেক দূরে গ্রাম। তো এক জায়গা থেকে আরেক জায়গায় যাওয়ার জন্য অনেক সময় লাগে, অনেক গহীন ছিল, একা যেতে পারতো না। তখন হচ্ছে বাঘ, ভাল্লুক, হরিণ, যদিও এখনো কালে ভদ্রে হরিণ দেখা যায়, তবে যেটা হচ্ছে বর্তমানে যে শালবন কেটে সেখানে হচ্ছে আপনার সামাজিক বনায়ন করে ফেলা হচ্ছে, শালবন সংকুচিত করা হচ্ছে, আদিবাসীদের জীবনযাত্রা, আদিবাসীদের স্বাস্থ্য, আদিবাসীদের মানে কালচার, সকল কিছু হচ্ছে আপনার সমস্যার সম্মুখীন হচ্ছে। তো সেই ক্ষেত্রে আজকে যেহেতু আমি কিছু কথা বলার সুযোগ পেয়েছি, তো আমাদের কিছু দুঃখ, কষ্ট, আন্দোলন, সংগ্রামের কথাটি আমি আপনাদেরকে জানাতে চাই। সেটা হচ্ছে আমাদের মধুপুরে আপনারা জানেন যে রিসেন্টলি যে ঘটনাগুলি ঘটছে, আমাদের মধুপুরে কিন্তু সেই 1962 সাল থেকে আজ অব্দি পর্যন্ত আমরা আদিবাসীরা আমাদের যে প্রথাগত যে ভূমি আছে, আমাদের বংশ পরম্পরায় আমরা যেখানে চাষবাস করি, সেই জায়গা জমি আমাদের মানে বন বিভাগ কোনো না কোনো ভাবে সেটা তারা জবরদখল করার জন্য তারা করছে। তারা দাবি করছে তাদের কাগজি মূলে তারা জমির মালিক বলে তারা দাবি করছে। আর সে সাথে আপনারা তো জানেন যে বিষয়টি, আদিবাসীরা একটা সময় এতটা সচেতন ছিল না, আর সেই সাথে আদিবাসীরা গহীন বনে বসবাস করত। তো তারা কাগজ, ভূমিকে তারা মা জ্ঞান করে, ভূমিকে তারা মা মনে করে। তো আমি আমার মাকে আমি কাগজ কলম করে নিতে হবে কেন আমার মাকে? তো এই ধরনের জ্ঞান রাখে আদিবাসীরা। আর আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে, আমরা যেটা বলি সেটা হচ্ছে, আমরা বলতে শুধু আমরা মানুষ নই, আমরা বলতে আমাদের যে চারিপাশ পরিবেশ, প্রকৃতি, পশু পাখি আছে, সকলকে নিয়েই আমরা। তো আনচিং বলে একটা গারো শব্দ আছে, যে আনচিং বলতে আমরা বুঝাই। আমরা বলতে কিন্তু গারোরা শুধু, আমরা গারোদেরকেই শুধু বুঝাই না, এখানে আনচিং বলতে বুঝানো হয় যে মানুষ ছাড়াও পারিপার্শ্বিক যে পরিবেশ প্রতিবেশ আছে, পশু পাখি আছে, সকলকে নিয়ে হচ্ছে আমরা। তো আদিবাসীদের এই উপলব্ধি। আর আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে, রিসেন্টলি যে বিষয়টা ঘটেছে সেটা হচ্ছে আদিবাসীদের 45 বিঘা জায়গা জমিতে লেক খনন করার যে পায়তারা চলছে, সেটার বিরুদ্ধে আদিবাসীরা সোচ্চার কণ্ঠ।
লিয়াং দা, সরি, আপনি মিউট হয়ে গিয়েছেন।
হ্যাঁ, আমাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ, এখন পারছি, থ্যাংক ইউ।
আমরা যারা আদিবাসীরা আছি, মধুপুর বনে যারা বসবাস করছি, মধুপুর বনবাসী আদিবাসী আমরা যারা আছি, আমরা শুধু স্বার্থপরের মতো আদিবাসীদের বেঁচে থাকবার বা আদিবাসীদের জায়গা জমির জন্য আমরা আন্দোলন করছি এমনটি নয়, কিন্তু আমরা আন্দোলন করছি প্রাণ প্রকৃতি, প্রাণবৈচিত্র্য রক্ষার জন্য, শালবন রক্ষার জন্য। আপনারা রিসেন্টলি দেখে থাকবেন যে আমরা শালবনের চিৎকার নামে একটি প্রোগ্রাম করেছি। অনেকেই জিজ্ঞাসা করেছে যে শালবন কিভাবে চিৎকার দিতে পারে। তো আমরা শালবনের হয়ে আমরা চিৎকার দিচ্ছি। এই নতুন প্রজন্ম, আমরা যারা এই প্রজন্মের আছি, আমরা শালবনকে রক্ষার জন্য আমরা সোচ্চার ভাবে আমরা মাঠে কাজ করছি। আর আরেকটি বিষয় হচ্ছে, শুধু আদিবাসীদের এখানে জায়গা জমি হুমকিতে নয়, আদিবাসীদের এখানে যে স্বাস্থ্যগত যে ঝুঁকি, এখানে যেহেতু আজকের এই আলোচনায় ফিলিপ স্যার এখানে আছেন, উনি আরো নিবিড় ভাবে বিষয়টি বলতে পারবেন। সেটা হচ্ছে, আমরা আরেকটি সমস্যার মধ্যে আছি, সেটা হচ্ছে পরিবেশগত স্বাস্থ্য ঝুঁকিতে আছি। এখানে নির্বিচারে শালবন কেটে দেওয়া হচ্ছে। আদিবাসীদের জায়গা জমিতে যারা অধিক মুনাফার লোভে অনেক চাষি আছে যারা কলা চাষ করছে, হরমোন ব্যবহার করছে, কীটনাশক ব্যবহার করছে, অবাধে ব্যবহার করছে, কোনো ধরনের কোনো নিয়ম তোয়াক্কা করছে না, তারা এইভাবে ব্যবহার করছে। সেই বিষয়টি নিয়েও কিন্তু আমরা বিভিন্ন ধরনের ওয়ার্কশপ করছি, গণসচেতনতামূলক কার্যক্রমগুলো করছি, তবু আমরা কিন্তু সেটাকে নিয়ন্ত্রণে আনতে পারছি না। আর আরেকটি বিষয় হচ্ছে মানে সমতল ভূমিকে মাটি খুঁড়ে সেখানে পানির লেয়ার পাওয়ার জন্য অনেক 10 থেকে 12 ফিট গভীর গর্ত খুঁড়ে সেখানে মেশিন ফিট করে সেখান থেকে হচ্ছে পানি উত্তোলন করা হচ্ছে ভূপৃষ্ঠ থেকে, যে সুপেয় পানি আছে সেটা। তো এটার জন্য আমরা খুব সমস্যার মধ্যে আছি, হুমকির মধ্যে আছি আমরা। আর আরেকটি বিষয় বলতে চাই, সেটা হচ্ছে আপনারা জানেন যে শালবন কিভাবে মানে ধ্বংস হয়েছে। 80-র দশকের সময় আপনারা জানেন যে 8,000-এর মতো যে রাবার বাগান আছে, সেদিকে কিন্তু আপনার ধরাতি, মোমিনপুর, সেদিকে আমাদের আদিবাসী যে গ্রামগুলি ছিল তাদেরকে সেখান থেকে কিন্তু উচ্ছেদ করে দেওয়া হয়, সেখান থেকে তাদেরকে বিতাড়িত করা হয়। সেখানে বিশাল অংশ জুড়ে 8,000 একরের মতো জায়গা নিয়ে সেখানে রাবার চাষ করা হয়, রাবার প্লান্টেশন করা হয়। আর পাশাপাশি হচ্ছে আপনার 1,000-এরও কাছাকাছি প্রায় 1,000 একর জায়গা জুড়ে আপনার বিমান বাহিনী যে ফায়ারিং রেঞ্জ করা হয়। সেখানে নয়াপাড়া নামে একটা গ্রাম ছিল টেলকির কাছেই, আগে টেলকি ছিল না, পরবর্তীতে সেই গ্রাম থেকে গিয়ে আপনার বিজয়পুরের দিকে চলে যায় মানুষ, কিছু মানুষ জলের দিকে কিছু মানুষ আসে, আর পাশাপাশি হচ্ছে তেলকিতে কিছু মানুষ সেখান থেকে স্থানান্তরিত হয়। এই যে আমাদের বঞ্চনার গল্পগুলো, এই যে আমাদের কষ্টের কথাগুলো আমরা বিভিন্ন জায়গায় বলি, কিন্তু একটা বিষয় হচ্ছে আমরা দীর্ঘদিন থেকে ভূমি অধিকারের কথাগুলো বলে আসছি, আমরা বিভিন্ন স্মারকলিপিগুলো আমরা প্রদান করে আসছি, তবু আমাদের কিন্তু এই ভূমি সমস্যাটি সমাধান হচ্ছে না। শুধু ভূমি সমস্যাই নয়, পরিবেশের কথাটিও আমি যে বলেছি সেটা। আর আরেকটি বিষয়, আমরা যে সম্প্রতি যে সমস্যার সম্মুখীন গুলো হচ্ছি সেটা হচ্ছে বন বিভাগ তারা দাবি করছে যে তাদের, আমরা যে জায়গাতে আছি সেই জায়গাটা তাদের, কাগজ কলমের মূলে তারা হচ্ছে দাবি করছে এটা আমাদের, কিন্তু আমরা দাবি করছি এটা আমাদের বংশ পরম্পরা, আমার বেড়ে ওঠা শৈশব সেখানেই। আর পাশাপাশি আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে আমরা যে সেখানে প্রথাগতভাবে আমরা বংশ পরম্পরায় বন বিভাগের আসার আগেও আমরা সেখানে বসবাস করেছি, আমাদের বাপদাদারা সেটা সেই গল্পটি বলে, বা আমাদের বেশ কিছু লেখালেখিতেও সেটা আছে। আর আরেকটি বিষয়, যখন 1971 সালে যখন বঙ্গবন্ধু আমাদের দুখলা গিয়েছিলেন, তখন কিন্তু পরেশচন্দ্র মৃর সাথে যখন দেখা করে, আমাদের গারো রাজা পরেশচন্দ্র মৃ, উনি মূলত আদিবাসীদের ভূমি নিয়ে, আদিবাসীদের জীবনযাত্রা, পরিবেশ নিয়ে উনি কাজ করেছেন। ওনার আমাদের একটি আদিবাসীদের একটি সংগঠন আছে, প্রাচীন সংগঠন, ঐতিহাসিক সংগঠন, সেটা হচ্ছে জয়ন্টশা আদিবাসী উন্নয়ন পরিষদ। সেই সংগঠনের হয়ে উনি কিন্তু কথা বলেছিলেন বঙ্গবন্ধুকে, যে আমরা যারা আদিবাসী আছি, বনবাসী আছি, আমাদের বাসস্থান, আমাদের জীবন জীবিকার জন্য, আমাদের ভূমি ব্যবস্থা করার জন্য উনি বলেছিলেন। যে ন্যাশনাল পার্ক যখন করা হয়েছিল তখন তিনি আদিবাসীদের দুঃখ কথাগুলো ওনার কাছে তুলে ধরেছিলেন। তখন কিন্তু বঙ্গবন্ধু বলেছিলেন যে শত শত মানুষকে আমি মানে হুমকির মধ্যে বা বিপন্ন করে আমি উদ্যান রচনা করব না। পরবর্তীতে ঠিক আছে, সেই উদ্যান সংকুচন করা হয়, ন্যাশনাল বা জাতীয় ন্যাশনাল পার্ক করা হয়, সংকুচন করা হয়। পরবর্তীতে দেখা যায় যে বাঙালি যে অঞ্চলগুলি আছে সেই অঞ্চলগুলি বাঁধ রেখে পরবর্তী আদিবাসী যে জায়গা আছে সেটাকে নির্দিষ্ট করে রেখেই মূলত ন্যাশনাল পার্ক করা হয়। আর পরবর্তীতে হচ্ছে আপনার 1984 সালে,
লিয়াংদা, আমি যদি একটু ইন্টারাপ্ট করি, লিয়াংদা আপনি যদি একটু সংক্ষেপে বলেন, কারণ আমাদের নেক্সট স্পিকারের টাইমটাও একটু ক্রস হয়ে যাচ্ছে, না হলে একটু যদি সংক্ষিপ্ত করা যায় 1 মিনিটের মধ্যে, আমি পরবর্তীতে আবার আসবো কিছু কোয়েশ্চেন অ্যানসার নিয়ে আপনার কাছে।
ঠিক আছে, তো সেই ধন্যবাদ। তো সেই বিষয়টি হচ্ছে আমি আপনাদেরকে জানাতে চাই। আর আরেকটি বিষয় হচ্ছে, আমরা কিন্তু যারা আছি মধুপুরবাসীরা, বনবাসীরা, আমরা সর্বোপরি আমরা মধুপুরের শালবন, মধুপুরের আদিবাসী মানুষের জীবন, মাটি, পরিবেশ, প্রকৃতি রক্ষার জন্য আমরা কাজ করে যাচ্ছি। আপনারা যারা এই আলোচনায় যারা সংযুক্ত হয়েছেন, আপনাদের কাছে আমাদের একটা উদাত্ত আহ্বান থাকবে যে আমাদের যে কথাগুলো, আমরা যেখানে আমাদের কথাগুলো পৌঁছতে পারি না, সে কথাগুলো আপনারা আমাদের মধ্য থেকে আপনারা পৌঁছে দিবেন। আদিবাসী মানুষের, মধুপুরের মানুষদের পাশে শালবন রক্ষার জন্য, আদিবাসীদের এখানে বেঁচে থাকার অস্তিত্ব রক্ষার জন্য আপনারা পাশে থাকবেন। ধন্যবাদ।
জি, থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ লিয়াংদা। I think we have our translator can translate.
Hello, I'm from Modhupur. We are not fine here in Shalbon. From my experience, from my childhood experience, I would like to tell you that the forest was intense in my childhood, and the social forestation is being replaced nowadays, and slowly, the forest is taken away from us. In 1962, they are taking away our land. They consider land, because we consider the land as a mother of ours. So we take care of this land and the forest, and we consider everyone in the forest as a whole. We don't think about only us. We think about every species in this land who exists. And we are indigenous people, and we are not only fighting for ourselves, for our own existence. We are fighting for every single species in this land. That's what I want to say. And I'm from, we live in the Shalbon, and we have been working, and we have been struggling to protect this forest. And Philip sir is here, and he was with us all the time. And our health is also at risk, and our existence is also at risk. And every time we are facing trouble because our forest is taken away. There is a land dispute with the forest department, and people were displaced for the rubber plantation, and our land problem is not solved enough. We have been living here for before the forest department was even established. So we consider this our motherland, and we have been living here for ages. So before the forest department was in place, we were here, and we have this is a big problem for us and for whoever we are. I mean, we are the indigenous people. And our leader also, I would like to mention that the leader, our leader that time in 1971, when Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib was alive, that time he even discussed with our leader, and he agreed that the land will be protected. That time, you know, they were planning to build a national park. So that's the gist of my, I mean, what I wanted to tell, that we need to protect this land, and we need to survive, and this is our existence. And I would like to tell you that this I have to express myself, and we are working. The young generation is very, very active to protect the forest here in this area, and we are actively working, and we would like you to take note of it and do something so that we can save the forest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liang, for being so transparent about the Modhupur Tangail's backstory. I think you guys are the front runners around here. And in short, we appreciate your presence in our lives and the many things we have picked from you guys. So with a further delay, I would like to request our next second speaker, Ms. Shailaja Fennell, ma'am. The floor is on yours.
Dhanyawad, Fatima. Do I have the opportunity to share slides?
Yes, ma'am, you have 5 to 6 minutes if you,
yeah,
it's that
thank you. I will try then to share if I can. I'm not getting a share slide. Ah, here we are. Brilliant. Thank you. Perfect. It's not allowing me to share slides. It says host only. Sorry. Okay, I'll just talk. Don't worry, Fatima. It's not a problem at all. Thank you. So namaskar. I'm honored to be able to speak at this session. I was really fascinated by what Liang Bhai said. I think the story of indigenous peoples and their understanding, or what we call local knowledge, what stewardship and local knowledge does, has unfortunately been very late in recognition by international organizations. And since we are at the inauguration of the Resilience Hub for South Asia, this loss of local knowledge is particularly poignant in the case of South Asia since the 1960s with the advent of the Green Revolution. And so here I'm talking about development, Bikash, and how it is seen in relation to growth. And often this means that the original stewards of the land, in this case, the indigenous people in the Shal region, have been left out of the picture. Why does this happen? Because our concerns with food and development make us very hasty. And in that haste, we go for the shortest and the quickest way to growth. Today, in the region, we are facing, in the case of Pakistan, a huge flood with 33 million people who have been affected. But let us recall, in 2010, there was a flood, and that was 18 million people. And of course, we can look for similar numbers, and we will find them in Bangladesh or in other parts of South Asia. What we have in the context of climate change is both a challenge and an opportunity. And as Liang Bhai mentioned, the opportunity is something that we need to embrace. Why is it that local knowledge is so important? Because the lives of indigenous people, and they are one of the few communities that we can say this about, their lives are still intertwined with the natural world. For the rest of us, particularly 50% of the world becoming urban in 2017, we have moved to the cities, and we have come to regard the natural world as an area to obtain resources rather than the ability to work with the natural world. This was previously done in the global north, and it is now unfortunately being done by governments in South Asia, even after independence, 70 odd years after independence. So the feature that I would like to bring to our attention is, as in the case of the shal trees, the importance of forms of livelihood that, if they are erased, will actually displace even more people. So if we have 33 million people being affected in Pakistan today, how many of them will have livelihoods if their traditional livelihoods are wiped out? And therefore, what we need to think about is, why is what we call heritage, not just buildings, but intangible heritage. Livelihood is an intangible heritage, particularly for indigenous people. The way they work with the natural world creates a network of value creation that does not destroy the natural world, but is often at odds with the way in which development processes work. And so I would like to, in my few minutes left, to talk about work that we have done in Cambridge, working with partners in the Global South. And this was a major project called Tigress, nothing to do with tigers, transforming South Asia, in this case, India specifically, through next green revolution for sustainable food. And working on that project between 2017 and 2022, what we found was that there is a huge amount of cultivation that has escaped or is below the radar because it's not in rice, wheat, and maize, which are the three cereals which are the major part of consumption since the Green Revolution. So in the case of semi-arid regions, so Southern India, Western India, we looked at millets, ragi, bajra, quinoa in other parts of the world, similarly, small seeds that can survive at much higher temperatures and can manage with much less water. But we know of many of these crops. We can think about taro or yam. In fact, we set up an organization called the Forgotten Crop Society in 2021 to bring together researchers, scientists, social scientists, institutions to think about, as Liang Bhai has said with shal, how do we work with areas where there still is the opportunity to keep the stewardship and to work with the natural world. So I'm very honored to be able to speak about our work, but much more about learning about the work that is being done through ICAD. And I look forward to the next 10 days. Dhanyavad.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your sharing experience. It was really, really informative. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Philip Gain, who has the most expertise in this area, to work on it. Sir, the floor is on yours.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this event, which is very interesting. I mean, I had to join because, I mean, I consider Modhupur as my home. Old back in 1980. Class. After my 12th class, I spent 3 months in Modhupur, went after groups of monkeys, and it still had, I mean, good forest. So I consider it as my home. And I mean, both the Liang has made mention a couple of times about Forest Chandramri, and actually I always lived with him when I went to Modhupur. I mean, I had a room next to his room, and we made a documentary film back in 1993, and the title of the documentary film is Mandi. If you will be interested, I mean, you all can watch the film. After 30 years of 28 years of making the film, I have been able to put it on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Philip Gain. So if you really would like to see what happened to Modhupur, you can watch that film. And then recently I have also uploaded another film called Silvantia, Modhupur Oronner Artona, the Silvantia. So you can actually watch. And then we recently have published a book. It is about the agony of people, or people of, I mean, by people, we mean Garo, Koch, and even Bengalis. So, I mean, we surveyed some 44 villages, all household, 11,048 households. So there's the report. And then there is another film, Stolen Forest. I make mention of all this because, I mean, when I saw the title of today's event, I mean, it was a bit shocking for me because, I mean, all that we see in Modhupur, all bad things that have happened, it actually has nothing to do with climate change. You see, in this Sal belt, Modhupur is not in the center of the country. It is actually not center of the country. And I mean, if you take the picture of all sal forest patches in Bangladesh, today hardly 10% remains. And then you go to Nepal, where sal forest start. I mean, if you have been to Chitwan National Park in Tarai, 1,000 square kilometer forest, Chitwan National Park. I actually went there to see how Modhupur looked like in the past, with elephants, with peacocks, with tigers, and with all sorts of animals that you see today in Chitwan used to be seen in Modhupur. So I went to see there. And then, to be very brief, all that has happened to Modhupur and sal forest and to our forest. I mean, it has very little to do with climate change. I mean, people don't talk about climate change when they look at our forest. I mean, when I went to Modhupur in 1980, spent 3 months, it had very good forest. And then next time I went was in 1986. I heard a news that some Garo houses have been burned. So I went there, and then I found a couple of houses in the western part of Modhupur burned down, and then people had been, I mean, bitten by the forest department and by the goons who had been brought by the forest department. And it was mainly for the preparation of second rubber development project. I mean, Bangladesh government had already implemented a project with its own money and 8,000 acres of land had been taken, I mean forest land in Bangladesh and probably anywhere else in tropical Asia and Africa. Wherever you see rubber, it actually replaces natural forest. So there, it was not any exception in Modhupur. So, I mean, 8,000 sal forest had been cut, replaced by rubber. And then a second rubber plantation project was in the pipeline. It was to be funded by Asian Development Bank, $60 million project. And I started reporting, actually. I used to report in 3-4 newspapers, magazines. And at some point, Asian Development Bank decided not to fund. I mean, the money already got into the pipeline. And then Asian Development decided not to fund. But then Asian Development Bank did not give up. It started funding other plantation projects. And Asian Development Bank has actually planted 2 projects. One is Thana Forestation and Nursery Development Project, and then Forestry Sector Project. And then, I mean, these 2 projects has completely ruined, completely destroyed Modhupur sal forest. I mean, there are, of course, many issues, land issues. And then, I mean, how the Garos and Koch have become historical victims, what changes are happening. But the points I want to make, when Asian Development Bank, if Asian Development Bank did not fund, if you watch my 2 documentary films, Mandi and Silvantia, you will see, I mean, documentation of impacts of plantation project, plantation economy, almost, I mean, similar. So, I mean, it is mainly for plantation projects funded by Asian Development Bank, which is an international financial institution or multilateral development bank. I took interest in this, in looking into what happens because of plantation projects funded by World Bank and Asian Development Bank. I was inspired by a book that I bought at Harvard University back in '91. I went to US to participate in an international conference, mainly because of my writing on Modhupur. I was invited because one professor, Professor James Rush, wrote a book about environmentalism Asia. The title of the book is The Last Tree. It's a very, I mean, I don't know if anyone can have a hand on it, but I went there and I was so inspired that it is multilateral development banks that are at the roots of the problem and who actually control international financial institutions like Asian Development Bank and World Bank. And I mean, I wrote a couple of op-eds, kind of muckraking op-eds in the Daily Star. You can read them. I mean, the Daily Star, and then you write my name, and then you will see, like say, Modhupur, the sylvan aroma is gone, and there are a couple of reports. Why do we need an artificial lake? All this, all the issues that have been mentioned by Liang. So, I mean, we have been seeing something very, very, I mean, which amounts to be, I mean, top crimes. What we see in Modhupur, we see in, I mean, around the world, in tropical Asian, African countries and Latin America. And you know what happened? Asian Development Bank, after implementation of 2 projects that had been funded by ADF, Asian Development Fund, I mean, Asian Development Bank backed out. And World Bank also backed out, but then World Bank has come back. World Bank has come back with RED+. And then right now, World Bank is implementing a very controversial project, which is called SUFOL, Sustainable Livelihood Project. I mean, this is very controversial because, I mean, World Bank comes late after a few years of pause, and then it is doing very strange things in Modhupur. I mean, we still have few patches of sal forest in Modhupur, and then all the understory vegetations have been cleared under this World Bank funded project, which is a project funded by IDA, International Development Association. I mean, IDA and ADF funded projects are always very problematic. So, I mean, we have all these issues, serious issues in Modhupur. all that we see, banana plantation, then pineapple plantation, spice plantation, then other kinds of plantation, taro plantation, and then these require huge quantities of chemical fertilizer, pesticides, and hormone. And you see, all these have happened because of plantation economy. Plantation economy, initially you have been mentioning acacia, but in the first rotation, funds development bank plantation was mainly by eucalyptus. And then in the face of criticism, eucalyptus has been officially abandoned, banned. Like say, I wrote extensively on this. And then Forest Department couple of times, and even the military, I mean, it looks like that they wanted to even kill me because I wrote so many reports, and Asian Development Bank stopped funding. And Asian Development Bank, it was late, but it was still good that Asian Development Bank has completely stopped funding any forestry project from 2005. So these are the issues. And of course, I mean,
Sir, kindly sorry to interrupt, sir. I will
I will just finish. I will just finish. Now say
I will come back to you again.
Okay.
Sir, just give me the floor, sir. I'm sorry, sir. So, so now I would like to ask to all our speakers some questions, like based on their experience or expertise. In the meantime, I would request the audience to drop your questions in the chat box, and my colleague Afsar will raise them right after the discussion. And first of all, we all have a question for Liang. I will ask this in Bangla. Liang, you're here? Liang, আপনি কি আছেন?
হ্যাঁ, আমি শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
জি, দাদা।
আপনার কথা শুনতে পাচ্ছি না।
আচ্ছা লিয়াং দা, আমি তাহলে বলি। ঠিক আছে, তাহলে আমরা যদি আপনাকে আমরা জিজ্ঞেস করতে চাচ্ছিলাম যে আপনি তো যুবদেরকে নিয়ে অনেক কাজ করেন, তাই না? তো তাহলে আপনার কি মনে হয় যে আপনার যে অর্গানাইজেশন আছেন আপনি, তাহলে উনাদের প্রত্যাশা কি ফিউচারের জন্য, এবং আমরা কিভাবে উনাদেরকে এই যে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তন যে হচ্ছে, উনারা এটার সলিউশন কিভাবে ক্রিয়েট করতে পারে, আমাদেরকে যদি এটা বলতেন 3 মিনিটের মধ্যে। থ্যাংক ইউ।
ধন্যবাদ। জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের জন্য আমরা বিশেষভাবে আমরা যেটা বলছিলাম যে আমরা তো বিভিন্ন জায়গায় আমাদের সিরিজ অফ মিটিং হয়েছে, মানে সরকারি পর্যায়ের অনেকের সাথে কথা হয়েছে। আমরা শুরু থেকে আমরা যেটা বলে আসছি যে আমাদের যে জায়গা জমি আছে সেটা সুচিহ্নিত করা হোক। ত্রিদলীয় সার্ভে করার জন্য বলেছি, আদিবাসী, বন বিভাগ আর হচ্ছে রাজস্ব। মানে 3 দলীয় সার্ভে করার জন্য বলেছি, যাতে আদিবাসীরা যে জায়গাতে আছে বংশ পরম্পরায় সেই জায়গাটি সুচিহ্নিত করে সেটা সুব্যবস্থা করে দেওয়া হোক আদিবাসীদের জন্য, আর বনভূমির যে জায়গাটা আছে সেই জায়গাটিও সুচিহ্নিত করা হোক। এখন আর একটা বিষয় হচ্ছে আদিবাসীদের জায়গাটাও ঠিক করে দেওয়া হচ্ছে না, আর পাশাপাশি শালবনও কিন্তু সংকুচিত হচ্ছে বিভিন্ন ভাবে। সেটা অসাধু বন বিভাগের অসাধু কর্মকর্তাদের সাথে আঁতাত করে প্রভাবশালী ব্যবসায়ীরা তারা কোনো না কোনো ভাবে তারা জঙ্গলটি দখল করে নিচ্ছে আর কি, শালবনটি দখল করে নিচ্ছে। আর আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে রিসেন্টলি যে বিষয়গুলো হচ্ছে সেটা হচ্ছে তাজা শাল গাছ কেটে সেখানে মানে বনায়নের নামে, সামাজিক বনায়নের নামে সেখানে আদা কচু লাগানো হচ্ছে, যেটা ফিলিপ স্যার যেটা বলেছেন যে হরমোন ব্যবহার করা হচ্ছে, নির্বিচারে হরমোন ব্যবহার করা হচ্ছে। আমরা কিন্তু তৃণমূল পর্যায়ে আদিবাসীদেরকে নিয়ে যখন উঠান বৈঠক হয় তখন আমরা আদিবাসীদেরকে বলি যে আদিবাসীদের যে মানে প্রথাগত যে তাদের জ্ঞান আছে, আদিবাসীদের যে নিজস্ব জ্ঞান আছে আবাদ ফসল করার জন্য, সেই জ্ঞানটাকে ব্যবহার করার জন্য, অর্গানিক ভাবে চাষাবাদ করার জন্য আমরা কিন্তু উৎসাহিত করছি। আর পাশাপাশি শালবন রক্ষার জন্য আমরা অনেক জায়গায় আমরা যোগাযোগ করছি। গতকালকেও আমরা রসুলপুরে আমরা মহোদয়ের সাথে আমরা কথা বলেছি, রেঞ্জারদের সাথে কথা বলেছি কিভাবে শালবন রক্ষা করা যায় এই বিষয়ে। গতকালকে আমাদের একটা গোল টেবিল বৈঠক হয়েছে। তো আমাদের 9 সেপ্টেম্বর আমাদের শালবন রক্ষা নামে একটা প্রতিবাদী সাংস্কৃতিক সমাবেশ আমরা আয়োজন করেছি। তো আমাদের কার্যক্রম চলমান। আর আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে শালবন রক্ষার জন্য আদিবাসী থেকে শুরু করে পাশাপাশি বন বিভাগের সাথে সমন্বিতভাবে বসে কথা বলে এটাকে সমাধান করতে হবে। ধন্যবাদ।
দাদা, আপনার কাছে আমার আরেকটা প্রশ্ন ছিল, সেটা হচ্ছে আপনি আপনার পরবর্তী প্রজন্ম নিয়ে আপনার কি চিন্তাধারা?
Excuse me, can I just translate what
Sure. Okay.
he just
Sure.
told?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
We are sorry, we are having meeting with a government. We are having sessions with government in different level. So we requested 3 types of solution, and there are people, you know, the land is taken away from the forest land is taking away by the local influential people. We need the solution for that. And they are using there are the Philips are, I mean, I wanted to mention that Philips are already mentioned about the plantation economy. So they are they're planting the rubber and the other like ginger and banana, and for this plantation they are using hormones and other chemicals, which is very, very harmful for this forest, the Shalban forest. So we are trying to get a solution for this, and we are organizing ourselves so that, you know, we can resolve this issue. And 9 September we have another session, and we look forward for this session, and we have been working with the forest department and indigenous people together so that we can resolve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
লিয়াং দা, আমি যদি আমার পরবর্তী প্রশ্নটা আপনাকে করি, সেটা হচ্ছে আপনি যেহেতু একটা ইউথ বেসড অর্গানাইজেশন নিয়ে কাজ করেন এবং ইউথ এম্পাওয়ারমেন্ট নিয়ে কাজ করেন, তো সেক্ষেত্রে আপনি কি স্বপ্ন দেখেন বা আপনার আশা কি পরবর্তী প্রজন্ম নিয়ে?
আমার আশা বা স্বপ্ন, এটা বলতে গেলে আমার সেই শৈশব তো আর কেউ ফিরিয়ে দিতে পারবে না, আর যে শালবন ছিল সেই শালবন তো আর ফিরিয়ে দিতে পারবে না। তবে পরবর্তী প্রজন্মের কাছে আমরা এটা আশা করি যে আমাদের যে আদিবাসী জীবন আর সে সাথে মধুপুরের মাটি, পরিবেশ ও মানুষের যে বেঁচে থাকবার জন্য যে মৌলিক অধিকারগুলো আছে, সেই অধিকারগুলো যেন সুনিশ্চিত হয়। আর আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে, আমার কথার সাথে আমি একটা বিষয় সাপ্লিমেন্ট করতে চাই, সেটা হচ্ছে মধুপুরের, এর আগে আমাকে প্রশ্ন করা হয়েছিল যে পরিবেশ রক্ষার জন্য, আমি যেটা বলবো যে মধুপুরের শালবন ও পরিবেশ যে বর্তমান যে ধ্বংসযজ্ঞগুলো চলছে সেটা থামানোর জন্য আমি বলবো যে সেটা মানে যথাযথ আইন প্রয়োগ করতে হবে, আদিবাসীদের সাথে অর্থপূর্ণ আলোচনা করে আদিবাসীদের সাথে জরুরিভাবে বসে কথা বলে সেটা করতে হবে। আর পাশাপাশি আদিবাসীদের যে ভূমি সমস্যা রয়েছে সেই ভূমি সমস্যা সুচিহ্নিত করে সেটা সমাধান না করলে কিন্তু আমরা মধুপুরের শালবন আমরা রক্ষা করতে পারছি না। বড় বিষয়টি হচ্ছে এটা, আশঙ্কার জায়গাগুলি এটা। আর আরেকটা বিষয় হচ্ছে আমরা অসম্ভব একটা আতঙ্কের মধ্যে আছি, সেটা হচ্ছে পরবর্তী 20 বছর পর আমরা যে পানিটা আমরা পান করছি, মধুপুরের যে সুপেয় পানি পান করছি, সেটা আমাদের উত্তর প্রজন্মরা সেই পানিটাও পাবে কিনা সেটা আমরা নিয়ে খুবই শঙ্কিত। কারণ যে সুপেয় পানি সেটা গভীর মাটি থেকে তুলে আনা হচ্ছে আনারস চাষের জন্য, কলা চাষের জন্য কিন্তু প্রচুর পানি লাগে, প্রচুর পানি ব্যবহার করতে হয়, কলা চাষের জন্য দিতে হয়, আনারসের জন্য দিতে হয়। রিসেন্টলি যে আনারসের একটা নতুন জাত এসেছে সেটা হচ্ছে জলঢুঙি নামে একটি জাত আছে। আগে যে আদিবাসীরা যে আনারসটি চাষ করা হতো সেটা হচ্ছে ক্যালেন্ডার প্রজাতির, সেটা হচ্ছে আপনার পানি দেওয়া লাগতো না, সেটা সিজনাল যে পানি হতো প্রাকৃতিক ভাবে সেটা দিয়েই মূলত হয়ে যেত সেই চাষটি। কিন্তু রিসেন্টলি যেটা চিরগাং থেকে নিয়ে আসা হয়েছে যে প্রজাতিটি, সেটা হচ্ছে আপনার প্রচন্ড কীটনাশক দিতে হয়, হরমোন ব্যবহার করতে হয়, আর পাশাপাশি হচ্ছে পানি প্রচুর ভূগর্ভস্থ থেকে পানি তুলে নিয়ে আসতে হয়। তো এটার জন্য আমরা ভাবছি যে আর এক হচ্ছে শালবন থাকছে না। যে আমি যেটা মনে করি, জানি না এটা সায়েন্টিফিক্যালি কতটুকু সঠিক, যে আমি যেটা মনে করি যে আমি যে পানিটা পান করছি আমার মনে হয় সেটা শালবনের নির্যাস আমি পান করছি। আমি যে পানিটা পান করছি, যেখানে শালবন থাকবে না, যেখানে মধুপুরে একাশিয়া, মিনজিয়াম, ইউক্লিপটিয়াসে ভরে যাবে, সেখানে জানি না পানিটা কেমন হবে, আমরা পানিটুকু পাবো কিনা, আমরা এটা নিয়ে খুবই আশঙ্কার মধ্যে আছি। তো এটাই, ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে।
I would like to say that no one can. Sorry, I would like to say that my childhood and Shalbon, the forest, will not come back. No one can give it back to us. So we are fighting for our basic rights, and this is very important for indigenous people's survival, and we would like to implement our basic rights right now, and all the problems surrounding with the indigenous people, we would like to resolve this through our movement, through our work. So our existence is at risk. That only I can tell you, and we have to work hard to resolve this issue, and we have been doing it so. And I would like to also mention that I'm very much scared that within next 20 years, for our next generation, we'll not be able to get water because of the effect of the banana plantation and the pineapple plantation. Nowadays, they are doing the pineapple, the kind of pineapple plantation they are doing, the cultivation they are doing, that needs more water, and they are taking the water from the underneath of the earth they are taking, and this is going to be a big problem for next 20 years, because we will not have to drink any water, because I'm very much concerned about this issue. Before it was not like that. Before they were having another kind of pineapple they were planting, but nowadays this plantation is making our existence at risk, and I'm really worried about it. That's all I wanted to tell.
Thank you, Liangda, for your prompt answer. So now I'd like to ask Shailaja Fanal ma'am a few questions. My first question would be, ma'am, how do you think the climate change affecting the culture and food habits of the indigenous communities around the globe?
Thank you, Fatima. That could be another whole seminar, but I'll answer the question in a short form. So as both Philip and Liang have mentioned, the global system is a production-based system, and it only looks at foods in terms of whether it's a banana or a pineapple, in terms of the value that's coming into the value chain. It doesn't look at the relationship between production and food and consumption of food. That is linked to what we produce in Bangladesh and you sell somewhere else in the global north. But of course, the majority of smallholder farmers across the world, whether it's in South America, in Sub-Saharan Africa, or South or Southeast Asia, those with less than 2 acres are called smallholders. They produce to consume. And one of the things that we have found is as farmers are entering the global value chain, they will produce food for the global north, but they will eat worse. So one of the things that has happened, for example, is that the cheapest food is eaten. So polished rice, we know, for example, is increasingly eaten, for example, in Bangladesh. And what that does is that it removes, because nothing else is available, you end up with, and this is something WHO has shown over the last decade, a massive onset of adult diabetes in South Asia, which is increased by 70% over the last decade. And this is because of eating these polished grains without a balanced diet. And so you may grow more food, we may grow more food as a region, but that doesn't necessarily mean we eat better. And this is now called the triple burden of malnutrition. it results in poor people becoming obese. And sometimes I say it means that first world diseases are now in the third world, right? And we can laugh, but it's a very serious matter. The second point in relation to what you asked, Fatima, is if we look at the food plate, what do people eat? So traditionally, for example, in a wedding or in a birth ceremony, you'll find a combination of greens, a very small amount of carbohydrate, and local proteins. These have also disappeared from discussion. One of the things that I learned through the Tigris project, and which I continue to do, and I would very much like to think about the Resilience Hub doing it, is collecting recipes from indigenous communities. What was eaten? How was it processed? This provides a way, if these crops, for example, the case of quinoa, which was a bad example because it didn't help the Peruvian farmer, but in Bangladesh, there are many products of high value. If they can be processed in the region, then the incomes can go up, and that would allow consumption to improve. So two things: learning from indigenous people, both how they produce and consume, but then building institutions in the region so that new livelihoods, which are improved versions of the older system, can allow indigenous groups and youth. As Liang Bhai says, there's a whole growth of a youth movement. So both of these would be very useful. And going forward, I think a seminar on both consumption and production, sustainable consumption, would be excellent if we could do that through ICANN. Thank you for your question, Fatima.
Ma'am, I have one more question. That is, do you have any few recommendations for our future generation or on reforming policies?
So for me, the young generation is the reason for hope. They ask difficult questions. They want things to be different. And I would strongly recommend that both learning through working with local communities as equal partners, whether they are final year school students or college students, building projects, valuing and respecting our own communities. This is, after all, a hub that is going to work towards feeding into COP27, not waiting for the older generation or the global north. There are more people in the global south. Of the 9 billion, at least 5 billion will be in the global south. And they are very young populations. So I am hopeful. I look to young people, and that's what I would do at a university as an older person. But I work because I think that time is correct and there's a short amount of time. So working with young people and building particularly between science and social science, because the solutions are somewhere in between. No single discipline has the power, otherwise the problem would have been solved before. Human beings' lives are intersected across disciplines. People don't live by disciplines, they live in the real world. So I think for young people to create caucuses, to work, whether through civil society or through their universities, and to pull together, to have a critical momentum, to talk truth to power at COP27 going forward, I think is the way that I have seen is successful, and I would be very honored to be part of. Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you so much, Madam, for your insightful explanation. And finally, I have a question for Mr. Philip Gaines, sir, again. Sir, my question is for you. How can policies be reformed to increase the rights of indigenous people? Could you please share a few recommendations for various stakeholders to improve their current situation? Sir, are you here?
Okay, now you can hear me, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, oh, I wrote a report, I wrote an op-ed in the Daily Star on the Earth Day this year, and title is Ending Deforestation by 2030, an empty promise. So this op-ed was critical of the outcome of COP26. So I have never joined any, like say, kind of international conference on environment. I had opportunity to join one in Rio de Janeiro in, I think it was in 1993 or 92, the first Earth Summit. So we have always been, I mean, if it is the question of Modhupur, you know, in Modhupur, only some 5 or 6% people have titles for their land. So every time you are asking question in relation to climate change, you see Liang and others, they are talking about land rights. They are talking about, like say, changes in the attitude of the government. But I mean, they also, I mean, collectively, people talk little about, like say, role of international financial institution, role of donors, role of World Bank, Asian Development Bank, influential people. So, I mean, people need to be realistic. I mean, people need to stop outright any sort of plantation projects. And then, I mean, for young people, they should learn objectivity. Like say, the money we get from World Bank and Asian Development Bank, 80% of our loan comes from these two institutions. We get money mainly from ADF and IDA, these two windows. These are not critically examined. I have done it, and then I see, like say, for any policy change, we have to be very, very, I mean, critical. We have to be objective. So, I mean, people in the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, in our government, they know what they do. So they should stop doing that. And our responsibility is really to have, like say, a real kind of discussion with young people, with, I mean, university students. I do some at IUB and in other institutions with working journalists. So, I mean, if people ask me what recommendations I have, I mean, if people who have destroyed our land and asking me to give a solution, I never do that. I never give any recommendations. But I mean, in my muckraking writing, I explain things. So we need to teach young people. I mean, they are young people. They are ready to learn. I mean, how we explain, how we interpret. Let us not engage in more crimes when we are organizing conferences, international events. You know, most of the forests in Bangladesh have been destroyed at a time when, I mean, international communities committed to protect forest. If you remember Rio de Janeiro, the biggest commitment was to protect forest. And then, I mean, there was real rush for plantation projects with eucalyptus and acacia. We all know that, I mean, there is a global conspiracy to pulp this out. We do plantation because these are all pulp trees. I mean, in Bangladesh, our land is very little, so we don't see it. But you visit Kornofuli paper mill, you visit smaller paper mills, you will see that eucalyptus, acacia, they go there. I mean, these are pulp trees. And I mean, international communities know very well. So I have no recommendation for them because I have very little trust in them. But we have recommendation for ourselves, for our students, for our young people, that let us try to learn how to explain, how to interpret, how to investigate, how to think right.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful explanation. And you're the few people who spoke up for them. And we learned so much about the real world to your incredible experience and documentary. So now, thank you all to all the dear speakers. Now I would like to request my colleague Afsara to read out if there are any questions from our audience and take over the session. And thank you all from my end.
Thank you so much, Fatima, and thank you so much to all the panelists, Liang, Dr. Shalaja, and Dr. Philip Gain. It was a pleasure to hear from you all, and it was really exciting and interesting to learn about the lived experience of Liang Ritchil, who's the community leader of the Garo communities and also working with youth empowerment. And it was great to hear from Dr. Shalaja, that if we do not look through the locally led adaptation approach, when we are doing anything that's relating to the community. For example, we need to know that the farmers who are producing the food, they also need to have a link with the nature, and it's vice versa, right? You're giving back to the community and the community is giving back to you. Hence, we really need to look up sustainable production and consumption. And thank you, Philip Gain, for really shedding light on that, injustice is happening, and hence the basic rights such as rights to land, basic rights to have a say in the community is very important if you want to progress in future. And one of the great thing out of this conversation was that if you cannot work in silos, right? You need to work with different stakeholders in the community, in your society, in the community, to really build those institutional legacy where you're investing in the local institutions so that the community itself is resilient and is bold enough and is empowered enough to take their own actions and to really lead the way in terms of climate change adaptation, where they're resilient enough to own up to what they have. And it was a pleasure to listen from all of you. Thank you so much, all ladies and gentlemen. And if there are no further questions in the chat box, this brings us to the end of our discussion. On behalf of ICAD's locally led adaptation team, we would like to thank each and every one of you for your time and patience hearing us. Hope today's discussion was fruitful and we can take several key messages to act on COP27, which will be held in Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh. And hope we can really, represent these local voices from the front lines who are facing the impacts of climate change in their daily lives in terms of water, sanitation, hygiene facilities, in terms of water scarcity, in terms of, different infectious diseases, where we really need to look through the eyes of locally led adaptation, at the same time look in a just transition way. Thank you for managing your time. And a special thank goes to our speakers for sharing their thoughts with us. And last but not the least, I would like to really convey my regards to the Resilience Hub team. And thank you for the opportunity for really choosing us to have us in the first session, and the IT and communication team, and also ICAD for giving us the opportunity and the support to be here today. Thank you all. It was a great session, and hopefully we're looking forward to engage in more future webinars. So, if you have any ideas where you want to engage with us, where you want to really empower local communities, we are always here. Thank you so much.